pregnant woman lies face down on the floor of her own dressing room. A horrifying wound at the back of her head, blood trailing across the floor toward the stairs. Outside stands her husband, utterly silent, utterly composed, as though he already knew exactly what waited for him inside. This is the story of a mother who never got to meet her second child, and a husband who wept in front of the world while hiding something far darker underneath. Hello everyone, I'm Brian, and you're watching Who Was?, where we bring you the world's most mysterious and heartbreaking true crime stories. If you're new to this channel, please hit subscribe and tap that bell icon, because the episodes coming up will keep you up at night. Today's story is about David and Belinda Temple, a couple who looked perfect from the outside, but hid betrayal, suffocation, and eventually a murder that went unsolved for years. Let's get into it. Belinda grew up in an ordinary American family. She had a twin sister, Brenda, who was quite different from her even as a child. Brenda prioritized her education and went off to Stephen F. Austin University, while Belinda stayed behind with her parents. The reason was her boyfriend, Marshall Kelmy, 3 years older than her, whom she was head over heels for. Belinda's parents were firmly against the relationship. Their fear was that if Belinda continued seeing this boy, not only would her education suffer, but she'd end up pregnant far too soon and drop out of even community college. The topic caused repeated arguments at home, and one day, in a fit of frustration, Belinda's mother said something she would probably never forget. "That boy is nothing to you. Once you're married, go wherever you want. But until then, this house is mine." For a stubborn girl like Belinda, that sentence became a challenge. She decided she needed to prove she could run her own life. At a family dinner where Marshall had been invited, the two suddenly announced they were getting married. Silence fell over the table. Belinda's mother simply said, "Well, since the decision's already made," and the rest of the evening passed without another word. The wedding itself was nothing extravagant. No big celebration, no grand party. Belinda wore her sister's white dress, invited a few friends, and after a simple signing ceremony, the two walked around town drinking champagne. The very next day, Belinda packed her things and moved in with Marshall, who was still living with his parents at the time. But this marriage was Belinda's ticket to independence, not a declaration of deep love, and that reality caught up with her in the months that followed. Within 6 months, Marshall started spending less time at home, claiming he was working late, but the truth was very different. Belinda followed him one day and saw him walking hand in hand with another woman. She didn't cause a scene, didn't fight. She simply packed her bags quietly and went back to her mother's house. Marshall lingered at her doorstep for a long time, calling constantly, begging forgiveness. But Belinda's mind was made up. They divorced. This was the first major blow of Belinda's life, but instead of breaking her, it made her stronger. The following year, she joined her sister Brenda at Stephen F. Austin University, hoping this would be where her real life began. And indeed, it was there that she met someone who would completely change the course of her life, David Temple. But as beautiful as this meeting seemed, it hid a story that would, years later, take Belinda's life away entirely. David Temple was the captain of the university's soccer team, known on the field as a player who would give everything for his team. Since childhood, he had been a shining star in sports, and even in school, teachers respected him purely for his performance. But alongside this, David had another side, quick-tempered, aggressive, and sometimes so intense on the field that even his own teammates were taken aback. One teammate revealed that David's aggression might have been fueled by steroid use. After meeting Belinda, David's demeanor changed completely, at least on the surface. He would carry his queen in his arms and cater to her every need. But there was one condition. If any other man so much as smiled in Belinda's direction, David's temper would flare instantly, sometimes escalating into physical fights. This possessiveness felt like love at first, but it slowly morphed into control. David's parents adored Belinda. She too loved sports, which brought them even closer together. But Belinda's own friends and her twin sister were not happy about this relationship. They had known Belinda as a strong-willed, independent woman, but after being with David, she became quiet, withdrawn, and seemingly focused entirely on keeping her husband happy. Most concerning of all was how Belinda began drifting from her own family. Phone calls became rare. Visits home, whether for holidays or weekends, stopped entirely. Someone who used to talk to her mother every day now went months without contact. This was one of the classic warning signs often seen in toxic relationships, but at the time, no one took it seriously enough. As graduation approached, the couple got a bull terrier and named him Shaq. Right after receiving their degrees, David and Belinda got married. From the outside, this couple looked perfect, both attractive, both passionate about sports, both young. But underneath, Belinda was slowly losing herself, and she was aware of it. But by then, the road back felt too far gone. As easy as life seemed after the wedding, David's true nature began revealing itself over time, and this time, its target was Belinda's very sense of self. In 1998, Belinda was working part-time as a teacher at a local school, also coaching the girls' basketball team. The students listened to her half-heartedly, but respected her for her fairness, and were a little afraid of her too. Belinda was the kind of teacher who never overlooked student absenteeism. When she noticed one of her senior students, Riley Joe Sanders, had been missing class for months, she took it upon herself to investigate. Her colleagues told her it wasn't her problem, that the boy came from a troubled family and no one really cared about him. But Belinda didn't let it go. That same evening, she visited his mother and had a long conversation with her. As a result, Riley returned to school and even started playing basketball again. But one day during a game, when he shoved an opponent and Belinda called him out for it, Riley cursed at her and said, "You're going to pay for this. Watch yourself, especially in the evenings." This threat stayed in Belinda's mind, but there were far more dangerous things happening inside her own home. David and his school colleague, Quentin Harland, weren't just neighbors, they were close friends. They often watched games together and had family barbecues. One day, a new teacher, Heather Scott, joined the school. Quentin tried to impress her first, but Heather turned him down.
A little thing for the hot new teacher.
Did you become intimate with Heather Scott?
We kissed.
Was that as far as it went?
Yes, sir.
It later came out that Quentin's rival was none other than his own friend, David. David never told Heather he was married with a child. He didn't even wear a wedding ring. In front of the school staff, the two behaved like a happy couple. And astonishingly, Quentin knew about it the whole time, but kept his friend's secret, even when Belinda herself once confided her suspicions to him. "You're imagining things," Quentin had told Belinda. "David's your husband, a great family man. How could you even think that?" This false reassurance gave Belinda a strange sense of comfort, while in reality, David was humiliating her right in front of her, calling her fat, asking her to leave the room when guests were over as if embarrassed by her appearance. Belinda endured all of this silently, crying at night, never confronting her husband directly. While David was enjoying his second life, a new life was growing inside Belinda, and this news, for a while, made her forget all her past sorrows. In 1998, Belinda found out she was pregnant again. The news was so joyful that she forgot all the past grievances against her husband. For a while, it seemed like David was trying to be a responsible father too, but that effort didn't last long. Many nights he simply wouldn't come home, and Belinda was too afraid to ask why, worried his temper would flare even worse. For a pregnant woman, this fear was its own kind of torment. Belinda repeatedly asked David for help, to go shopping for the nursery, to paint the walls, to put up shelves, but David ignored every request. Eventually, Belinda took matters into her own hands. She went shopping herself, painted the walls herself, assembled the furniture herself, all while heavily pregnant, and after doctors had already warned that she might go into labor prematurely. Christmas was approaching. Belinda asked David what they should get each other, and David suggested they skip gifts for each other this year, saving the money for the baby instead, especially since doctors had warned the baby might arrive before the new year. Belinda agreed, believing her husband was simply thinking about their growing family. Christmas Day arrived. As agreed, neither gave the other a gift, except that David never gave Belinda anything at all, not even a small token. Worse, he suddenly packed his bags and announced he'd be spending the entire holiday season hunting with friends. Belinda told her sister Brenda about this, and Brenda dropped all her own plans to come stay with Belinda so she wouldn't be alone, especially with doctors warning that labor could begin at any moment. But in reality, David wasn't hunting at all. He spent the entire holiday with Heather, who at that very time wore a gold necklace around her neck, a Christmas gift from David. While Belinda prepared alone for the arrival of her child, her husband was celebrating with his other relationship. This scene was about to take an even darker turn in the weeks that followed. The new year began, but no one could have known that January 1999 would become the final month of Belinda's life. January 1999. Belinda was just weeks away from giving birth to her second child. David decided to give his wife a break from household chores that day, so he took their son Evan to the park for the evening so Belinda could rest. Father and son had fun playing outdoors, then got hungry and stopped at a nearby cafe for a sandwich and a cola before heading home. When David parked the car outside their house, he noticed the front door's glass was shattered. Without explaining anything, David grabbed Evan's hand and rushed him across the street to their family friend's house. "Let's go visit the Harlans for a bit," David said, not waiting for a response. Evan, struggling to keep up, asked, "Why can't we go see Mom?" David simply replied, "Mom's at the hospital right now," and hurried him along. Quentin Harland had barely opened the door before David dropped Evan off in the living room without a word and ran back toward his own house. Quentin, confused, shouted to his wife to watch the child and ran after his silent friend. When he saw the shattered front door of the Temple house, he realized David likely had no idea what awaited him inside. Inside, the house looked like a scene of chaos. Closets stood open, belongings scattered across the floor, and worst of all, trails of blood leading toward the stairs. Quentin pushed David aside and saw Belinda lying face down under the stairs in the dressing room, arms spread out, with a horrific wound at the back of her head. David, seemingly in shock, didn't scream, didn't rush to his wife's body. He immediately pulled out his phone and dialed the police. The dispatcher, unaware of the brutality involved, asked David to check her pulse or perform CPR.
And calls 911.
Does she have a pulse?
No, she had... Oh!
To do CPR for that baby.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
With the injuries that Belinda had, it was instant death.
David snapped back. "What CPR? Her head is splattered all over the walls." When police arrived, they struggled to get inside. Their bull terrier, Shaq, was barking and lunging at the unfamiliar uniformed officers.
When I got to the gate and attempted to open the gate to go in, Shaka was there.
Shaka was the Temple family dog, and he was the biggest, baddest, fiercest watchdog in all the neighborhood.
One officer even drew his weapon, prompting David to run out and yell for them to put the gun away as he hurried the dog into the garage. What police discovered once inside immediately raised suspicions that this was no ordinary robbery.
Against the fence, he was extremely aggressive.
When police get to the scene, they can't even get inside the house because the dog looks like he's ready to attack. They're getting ready to shoot the dog, and that's when David comes out.
He said, "My wife has been shot and she's dead."
Police officers began carefully examining the crime scene. The first question on their minds: how could an intruder get past such an aggressive dog without any sign of a struggle? Then they turned to the shattered front door. The glass was broken in a way that suggested someone had tried unlocking it from the inside, since the shards were scattered away from the doorway rather than at the threshold. In the living room, they found a box containing earrings, rings, and a gold chain, untouched, as if no thief had ever laid a hand on them.
Death investigation. Well, at first glance, it looks just like a burglary. You see forced entry to the back door, and that's kind of what you think.
Once they get to the master bedroom closet, the scene is horrific.
The victim laying on the floor of the closet. Head's kind of underneath the pair of jeans there.
Belinda was lying dead in her master bedroom closet.
A TV lay knocked over on the floor. All of this led investigators to a troubling conclusion. This looked staged. A real burglar takes everything he can carry, but here, nothing had been taken. And that dog, the one that wouldn't let anyone near the house, kept nagging at their minds.
Table and just laid on the floor, but it was still plugged in. A burglar is going to ransack. It's not just drawers pulled open. The drawers are going to be ransacked. They're going to be looking for things in the drawers. And we didn't have that.
The main bedroom, what was that like?
On top of the dresser was a jewelry box that certainly appeared to be intact, as opposed to having been like turned over or gone through. The chest of drawers.
Belinda had been shot in the back of the head while kneeling, her back turned to the shooter. Forensics suggested the weapon was likely a 12-gauge shotgun. But a shotgun isn't a typical burglar's weapon. It's bulky, hard to conceal, and Belinda was killed around 4 p.m. in broad daylight, when carrying a shotgun openly would be almost impossible without being noticed. Police asked David if he owned any weapons. He said he had a couple of rifles and showed them to the officers, but the shotgun that killed Belinda wasn't among them. Police asked David to come to the station to give a statement and help inventory the missing items. Visibly nervous, David went along. His son, Evan, still unaware of what had happened, stayed behind at the Harlan's house. Suspicion was beginning to shift toward David, but there was no hard evidence yet. Digging through case files, investigators discovered that 8 days before the murder, a house on the next street had been burglarized, and
Based on the size of the wound, it was determined Belinda was killed with a 12-gauge shotgun.
Cops search the house and they find 2 rifles, but they don't find a shotgun.
So there was no murder weapon at the scene.
the culprit was none other than Riley Joe Sanders, the very student who had threatened Belinda. Now there wasn't just one suspect. 2 names had surfaced, each with their own troubling motive. Riley Joe Sanders was brought in for questioning immediately. He had no alibi for the day of the murder, and his father owned a 12-gauge shotgun, the exact type used in the killing. But when police searched the Sanders home, no weapon was found. Once Riley realized police were building a case against him, he finally admitted the truth. He said that on the day of the murder, he'd been with friends, but had hidden this fact because they'd all been smoking marijuana together, and he didn't want to implicate anyone else. This explanation held up, and the charges against him were dropped. At that point, police had no further evidence against Riley, so the investigation shifted back toward David.
It is interviewed by the local news.
I can't believe anything like this would ever happen to her.
He gives an interview and tells reporters that he'd been at school all day, and come to find out, that wasn't true.
But at the end of the day, there wasn't enough hard evidence that made him a more plausible suspect than her own husband, so they turned their attention back.
But without hard proof, the case remained stuck for a long time. This raises a question worth sitting with. Was Riley truly guilty, or simply a young man who, through his own bad decisions, placed himself in the wrong place at the wrong time? That question lingered unanswered for years, but as time passed, a new secret began to surface, one tied directly to David's personal life. Investigators spoke to people close to David and discovered that there wasn't just one David Temple. There was another one, secretly involved with his school colleague, Heather Scott. Nobody knew about this, least of all Belinda herself, except for Quentin Harland, who stayed loyal to his friend, continuing to reassure Belinda that her husband was completely faithful. This secret relationship gave police a whole new angle. If David was looking to leave his pregnant wife behind for a new relationship, was it possible he'd decided to permanently remove the biggest obstacle standing in his way? Now the investigation pointed in one direction only, toward David Temple. But gathering solid proof wouldn't be easy.
Behind David Temple's behavior, the proverbial other woman enters the picture.
Years passed, and David Temple moved on with his life, as though Belinda had never existed. In 2001, he married Heather, and together they raised Evan. By 2004, 5 years had passed since the murder, and it seemed the case might remain unsolved forever. But in November 2004, police showed up at David's door once again, this time with handcuffs. They informed him he was being arrested on suspicion of murdering Belinda Temple. David denied everything, just as he always had. The trial didn't begin until 2007. The prosecution built its case around motive, David's affair with Heather. Colleagues testified that during Belinda's pregnancy, David had bragged about trading in his fat, pregnant wife for a young, beautiful Heather. According to the prosecution, David killed Belinda right after she got home from work. Her body was found still in her work uniform and shoes. The prosecution's theory was that David killed Belinda, then staged the burglary by scattering belongings around the house, before quickly driving off with his son to establish an alibi at the park. They also pointed to the fact that nothing had been stolen and that an aggressive dog guarded the property. Witnesses claimed to have seen David's car parked near a rice field around the time of the murder, with only Evan inside, suggesting the murder weapon might have been dumped there, though the shotgun was never recovered. Heather testified that before the murder, her relationship with David hadn't been serious, and she didn't even love him at the time. This statement created confusion for the jury. Could David really have killed his wife over a relationship that wasn't even serious, or was Heather lying to protect him? In November 2007, David was sentenced to life in prison. But the story didn't end there, because in 2009, a witness came forward whose testimony would turn the entire case upside down. In 2009, a friend of Riley Sanders went to the police to clear his conscience. He revealed that years earlier, Riley had told him he'd taken his father's shotgun, intending to rob the Temple house, partly to teach his teacher a lesson over her involvement with his mother at school. Riley said he'd nearly made it inside when the bull terrier came charging out of the garage. He fired at the dog, missed, and fled the scene, afraid the gunshot would draw the neighbor's attention. This new testimony was submitted to the court, prompting a review of the case. By this time, David had been released on bail. Heather, no longer willing to remain married to someone facing an uncertain and possibly lengthy prison sentence, filed for divorce. It took the jury a long time to decide what punishment David deserved. During this period, while David was free and awaiting a final ruling, the COVID-19 pandemic hit, delaying the case even further. It wasn't until 2023 that the case was finally revisited. This time, the court found David guilty once again. He was sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole after 17 years. It was the final chapter of a long, painful story, one that began as a beautiful romance and ended in a mother's death, a child's fractured memories, and years spent waiting for justice. David's son, Evan, who was just a small child at the time of the murder, stood by his father throughout the entire trial. Until the very end, he refused to believe his own father was capable of such a cold-blooded act. But in the end, the evidence and testimony brought the truth to light, a truth Belinda herself never lived to know. This was the tragic story of David and Belinda Temple, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one standing closest to you. Everyone, that was the heartbreaking story of Belinda Temple, a woman who spent her life trying to prove herself only to lose it at the hands of her own husband. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel, hit like on the video, and don't forget to tap that bell icon so you never miss a new episode. Let me know in the comments what you think about this case. I'm Brian, and I'll see you in the next story. Until then, take care.